The twin suns of Arendor hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue across the vast, rolling plains of the planet. The air was thick with a sense of urgency, a silent echo of the unspoken fears that plagued every woman who walked the fertile lands. Arendor had once been a paradise, a sanctuary for its inhabitants who had thrived in harmony with nature. But now, the very future of their world was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. Xenia stood at the edge of a high cliff, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky met the endless ocean. Her heart ached with a deep, gnawing sorrow, one that had grown heavier with each passing year. She was the leader of her people, the beacon of hope in a world where hope had become a rare and precious commodity. Yet, she felt the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. Arendor had always been a world of women, strong, intelligent, and graceful women who had built a society free from the conflicts that plagued many other civilizations. The men of Arendor, though fewer in number, had been their companions, their equals. Together, they had cultivated a world of peace and prosperity. But now, despite their best efforts, they faced an insurmountable challenge: infertility. For decades, the women of Arendor had tried everything. They had turned to science, to ancient rituals, to every possible solution their brilliant minds could conceive. Yet, no child had been born on Arendor in over 50 years. The realization that their genetic diversity had diminished to the point of extinction was a bitter pill to swallow. Their species was dying, and with it, the dreams of countless generations. Xenia clenched her fists, her nails digging into the palms of her hands. She could not let this be the end. Her ancestors had entrusted her with the leadership of their people, and she would not let them down. There had to be a solution, even if it meant leaving the only home she had ever known. Xenia, a soft voice called from behind her. Xenia turned to see Lysandra, her closest friend and advisor, approaching. Lysandra's silver hair shimmered in the sunlight, and her violet eyes were filled with concern. She, too, had felt the burden of their predicament, but she had never wavered in her support for Xenia. "It's time," Lysandra said gently. Xenia nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Yes, it is." Together they walked back to the grand hall where the Council of Elders awaited. The hall was a testament to the artistry of Arendor's people, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that depicted the history of their civilization. But today, the beauty of the hall felt like a hollow echo of a past that was slipping away. As Xenia entered, the elders rose to greet her. They were the wisest among them, women who had lived through the golden age of Arendor and had witnessed its decline. Their faces were lined with age and wisdom, but also with the same sadness that weighed on Xenia's heart. Xenia Elder Mariah spoke, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Have you made your decision?" Xenia met her gaze, her resolve firm. "I have. We must leave Arendor if we are to survive. We have explored every option on our planet, and we can no longer afford to wait. The time has come to seek help from beyond our world." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The decision to leave Arendor was not made lightly. Their planet had been their sanctuary for millennia, and the thought of leaving it behind was almost unthinkable. But they all knew there was no other choice. Elder Mariah nodded solemnly. "Then may the spirits of our ancestors guide you on your journey. You carry the hopes of our people with you, Xenia." With a final nod of determination, Xenia turned and left the hall, Lysandra by her side. The preparations for their departure had been made in secret, to avoid causing widespread panic among the remaining population. Only a select few knew of the mission, and those chosen to accompany Xenia were among the best and brightest of Arendor. As they approached the launch pad, Xenia's thoughts drifted to the other planets they would soon visit. Each had been carefully selected based on ancient star maps and the limited knowledge they had of other civilizations. Their mission was clear: find a species with the genetic diversity needed to save their people. The sleek, silver spacecraft stood ready, its engines humming with energy. Xenia's team was already aboard, making final preparations for the journey. Lysandra, always the voice of reason, placed a reassuring hand on Xenia's arm. "We'll find a way," she said softly. "I know we will." Xenia offered her a small smile. "We have to." With that, they boarded the ship. As the doors sealed shut, Xenia took one last look at the planet she had called home for so long. The lush forests, The crystal-clear rivers, the towering mountains, it was all a part of her people. But now, they had to look beyond Arendor if they were to have any hope of a future. The spacecraft lifted off, leaving behind the only world Xania had ever known. As they ascended into the vastness of space, she couldn't help but wonder what awaited them on the planets they would visit. Would they find salvation, or would their journey end in despair? The first planet they approached was Azura, a world known for its rich biodiversity. The Azurans were a species of tall, elegant beings with deep blue skin and eyes that shimmered like the night sky. They welcomed the Arendor women with curiosity and kindness, offering them the hospitality of their world. Xania and her team spent days exploring Azura, studying the flora and fauna, and learning about the Azurans' way of life. Their society was advanced, with a deep respect for nature and a unique approach to technology that blended seamlessly with the environment. But despite the Azurans' beauty and wisdom, it quickly became clear that their genetic makeup was too different from that of the Arendor women. Their DNA is fascinating, Lysandra remarked, as she examined the samples in their temporary lab. But it's not compatible with ours. There's no way we could produce viable offspring. Xania sighed, her disappointment palpable. Then we move on. There are other planets, other species. We can't give up. The Azurans bid them farewell with gifts and well wishes, but as the Arendor women's ship departed, Xania couldn't shake the feeling of failure. Each unsuccessful attempt only added to the growing weight on her shoulders. Their next destination was Draconis, a harsh world of volcanic landscapes and fierce, dragon-like inhabitants. The Drakons were a warrior race, proud and strong, with a culture that revered combat and honor above all else. Xania knew this encounter would be challenging, but she hoped that their resilience might also mean a robust genetic diversity. Upon arrival, the Arendor women were met with suspicion. The Drakons were not a trusting people, and it took all of Xenia's diplomatic skills to convince them that they meant no harm. Over time, the Drakons warmed to their visitors, intrigued by the idea of forming an alliance with a species so different from their own. But once again, the hope of genetic compatibility was dashed. The Drakons' DNA was too distinct, their biology too foreign. The potential for interbreeding was non-existent. Xenia's frustration grew with each passing day. The journey was taking its toll on her team, and the weight of their mission seemed to grow heavier with every failure. Yet they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that they were running out of time. The third planet they visited was Lyrius, a world of vast oceans and floating cities inhabited by the Lyrans, a graceful, aquatic species. The Lyrans were peaceful, their society centered around art, music, and spiritual enlightenment. They welcomed the Arendor women with open arms, eager to share their knowledge and culture. Xenia found herself captivated by the beauty of Lyrius. The underwater cities were marvels of engineering, and the Lyrans' harmonious way of life was a stark contrast to the urgency and desperation that had consumed her own existence. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to live among the Lyrans, to forget her mission and simply exist in their tranquil world. But reality soon intruded. The Lyrans, while kind and generous, were biologically incompatible with the Arendor women. Their DNA, adapted to life in the ocean's depths, was simply too different. There was no hope of blending their genes. Xenia's despair deepened. They had visited 3 worlds, met 3 different species, and yet they were no closer to finding a solution. Each failure felt like a nail in the coffin of her people's future. One evening, as they sailed through the sapphire waters of Lyrius, Xenia found herself alone on the deck of their ship. The stars above glittered like diamonds, reflected in the still waters below. It was a scene of serene beauty, but Xenia felt no peace. "Is this it?" she whispered to the night. "Is this all we have left? Endless searching with no end in sight." Lysandra appeared beside her, silent at first, simply offering her presence as comfort. After a moment she spoke. "Xenia, you've done more than anyone could have asked. You've led us through the stars, seeking a solution no one else could even imagine. But you must remember, this is a journey. We're not at the end yet." Xenia looked at her friend, the one person who had been with her through every trial and hardship. "I just don't know how much more I can take, Lysandra. Every failure feels like we're losing another piece of our future." Lysandra's eyes softened with empathy. "I know, but we have to keep going. We owe it to our people, to the children who might one day be born because of what we're doing now. And maybe, Just maybe, the next world will be the one we're looking for. Xenia nodded, drawing strength from Lysandra's words. You're right, we can't give up. We won't give up. With renewed determination, Xenia and her team prepared to leave Lyrius. The Lyrans, understanding the importance of their mission, sent them off with blessings and a promise of future friendship, should they ever return. As the spacecraft ascended into the blackness of space once more, Xenia set her sights on their next destination. The journey had been long and filled with disappointment, but there was still hope, and as long as there was hope, Xenia would continue to fight for the survival of her people. It was during their journey between planets that Xenia first heard the whispers of Earth, a small, blue world tucked away in a distant corner of the galaxy. The stories came from traders and wanderers, those who had traveled the stars and collected tales of far-off places. Earth, they said, was home to a species known as humans, a race with a genetic diversity unmatched by any other in the galaxy. At first, Xenia dismissed the stories as mere rumors. They had already encountered so many dead ends, so many false hopes. What could a primitive species from an obscure planet offer that the others hadn't? But the more she heard, the more she began to wonder. The tales spoke of humans as resilient, adaptable, and with a genetic code that was both complex and varied. If there was even a chance that these stories were true, could they afford to ignore it? One evening, as the ship glided silently through the void, Xenia called a meeting with her team. The mood was somber, but there was a flicker of curiosity in their eyes as she recounted the stories she had heard. I know it sounds improbable, she admitted, but what if there's something to these legends? What if the humans are our last hope? Lysandra, ever the voice of reason, was the first to speak. We've faced long odds before, Xenia. If there's even a possibility that this planet could hold the answer, I think we have to explore it. The others murmured in agreement. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to turn away from any potential solution, no matter how unlikely it seemed. Xenia nodded, feeling a spark of hope rekindling in her chest. Then it's decided. We'll set a course for Earth. The ship's navigators quickly adjusted their trajectory, and soon they were hurtling through space towards a planet that might hold the key to their future. As the stars streaked past the windows, Xenia found herself filled with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in a long time. The journey to Earth was not without its challenges. The planet was located in a relatively uncharted region of the galaxy, and they had to navigate through treacherous asteroid fields and the gravitational pull of distant stars. But with each obstacle they overcame, Xenia's determination grew stronger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the blue-green orb of Earth appeared on their screens. It was a small, unassuming planet, but there was something about it that drew Xenia in. Perhaps it was the vibrant colors, the swirling clouds, or the sense of life that seemed to pulse from its surface. As they entered the planet's orbit, Xenia felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was their last hope, but what if the stories were just that, stories? What if they found nothing but another dead end? There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Xenia gave the order to descend. The ship's engines roared to life as they broke through the planet's atmosphere, the heat shields glowing red-hot as they plummeted towards the surface. When the turbulence finally subsided, they found themselves soaring over vast expanses of blue ocean, with patches of green land visible in the distance. The sensors quickly identified a suitable landing site, a remote area far from any major human settlements. As the ship touched down on Earth for the first time, Xenia's heart raced with anticipation. They had traveled across the galaxy, faced countless trials, and now they were here, on the verge of discovering whether this planet held the key to their survival. The landing ramp lowered with a hiss, and Xenia stepped out into the crisp, fresh air of Earth. The scent of vegetation and soil filled her senses, and for a moment she simply stood there, taking it all in. The others followed, their expressions a mix of wonder and trepidation. "Welcome to Earth," Lysandra said softly, standing beside Xenia. "Let's hope the legends are true." Xenia nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "We'll find out soon enough." And with that, they began their search for the one person who might hold the key to their future, a human scientist named Alex, whose work in genetics had made him a legend among his own kind. Little did they know that this encounter would not only change the fate of their people, but would also set the stage for a journey of love, sacrifice, and discovery that would transcend the boundaries of time and space. The Arendor women had been prepared for the strangeness of Earth, but nothing could have truly readied them for the vibrant chaos that awaited them. From the moment they stepped off their spacecraft and onto the planet's soil, they were struck by the contrasts that defined this world. The landing site they had chosen was a secluded forest, far from the prying eyes of humans. Towering trees surrounded them, their leaves whispering in the gentle breeze. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the distant calls of birds echoed through the canopy. It was a place of serenity, a stark contrast to the urgency of their mission. Zinnia stood at the edge of the clearing, her violet eyes scanning the landscape. This world was alive in a way that Arendor had not been for many years. The lush greenery, the vibrant sounds, the pulsing energy of life, it was overwhelming, and for a moment she allowed herself to simply be present in it. But the peace was fleeting. Behind her, the others were already hard at work, setting up temporary shelters and scanning the surrounding area for signs of human activity. They had chosen this location for its remoteness, but they knew that venturing closer to human civilization was inevitable. Lysandra approached Zinnia, her silver hair catching the sunlight. The area seems secure for now. We've detected no immediate threats. Zinnia nodded, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. Good. We'll need to establish a base here before we make contact with any humans. Lysandra hesitated, sensing the weight of Zinnia's thoughts. Are you worried? Zinnia sighed, turning to face her friend. Worried? Yes, I suppose I am. This planet is so different from anything we've encountered before. The humans, they're unpredictable. We don't know how they'll react to our presence. We've faced uncertainty before, Lysandra reminded her gently, and we've always found a way through. This will be no different. Zinnia offered a small, appreciative smile. You're right, we can't afford to hesitate. We need to find this human scientist Alex and determine if he can help us. The decision made, the group quickly fell into a routine. They divided their tasks, some focusing on setting up their technology while others began studying the local environment. Despite the strangeness of this new world, the Arendor women were nothing if not adaptable. Their centuries of scientific advancement and exploration had prepared them well for this mission. To move freely among the humans, the Arendor women had to adapt their appearance. Fortunately, their technology allowed them to blend in seamlessly. They altered their attire to match Earth's fashion, adopting the styles of clothing they observed from the few humans they had seen from a distance. But it wasn't just about clothing. They had to learn the intricacies of human behavior, the subtle social cues, and the complexities of Earth's languages. It was a daunting task, but they approached it with the same determination they had brought to their scientific endeavors. Lysandra, who had always been skilled in communication, took the lead in this effort. She immersed herself in Earth's media, television broadcasts, internet forums, and news articles, absorbing information at an astonishing rate. She quickly became the group's expert on human culture, coaching the others on how to interact without raising suspicion. Zinnia, too, dedicated herself to the task. As the leader, she knew that she had to set an example. She practiced speaking English, mimicking the accents she heard, and studied the social norms that governed human interactions. It was exhausting work, but it was necessary. They couldn't afford any mistakes. After several days of preparation, they were ready to make their first foray into human society. They had identified a nearby city, a bustling metropolis that offered both anonymity and the resources they needed to track down Alex. It was a place where they could blend in, where they could observe without drawing too much attention. As they made their way through the city streets, Zinnia couldn't help but marvel at the sheer diversity of the human population. People of all shapes, sizes, and colors moved about, each with their own unique style and mannerisms. It was a far cry from the uniformity of Arendor, where the population had become more homogeneous over time. But beneath the surface differences, Zinnia noticed something else, an undercurrent of tension. The humans moved quickly, their faces often set in expressions of worry or determination. There was a palpable sense of urgency, as if they were all rushing towards some unseen goal. It reminded her, uncomfortably, of the desperation that had driven the Arendor women to Earth in the first place. Zinnia, look, Lysandra whispered, nodding towards a nearby newsstand. Zinnia followed her gaze and saw the headline splashed across the front page of a newspaper: Scientific Breakthroughs in Genetics, Dr. Alexander Reed speaks out. Her heart skipped a beat. This was the man they were looking for, the man who might hold the key to their future. Without hesitation, Xenia purchased the newspaper and quickly scanned the article. It was a profile on Dr. Alexander Reed, a renowned geneticist whose groundbreaking research had earned him international acclaim. The article described him as a brilliant but reclusive figure, dedicated to his work and rarely seen in public. "He's perfect," Lysandra said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "If anyone can help us, it's him." Xenia nodded, feeling a surge of hope. "We need to find him. And we need to do it soon." And with that, they began their search for the one person who might hold the key to their future, a human scientist named Alex, whose work in genetics had made him a legend among his own kind. Little did they know that this encounter would not only change the fate of their people, but would also set the stage for a journey of love, sacrifice, and discovery that would transcend the boundaries of time and space. The Arendor women had been prepared for the strangeness of Earth, but nothing could have truly readied them for the vibrant chaos that awaited them. From the moment they stepped off their spacecraft and onto the planet's soil, they were struck by the contrasts that defined this world. The landing site they had chosen was a secluded forest, far from the prying eyes of humans. Towering trees surrounded them, their leaves whispering in the gentle breeze. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the distant calls of birds echoed through the canopy. It was a place of serenity, a stark contrast to the urgency of their mission. Xenia stood at the edge of the clearing, her violet eyes scanning the landscape. This world was alive in a way that Arendor had not been for many years. The lush greenery, the vibrant sounds, the pulsing energy of life, it was overwhelming, and for a moment she allowed herself to simply be present in it. But the peace was fleeting. Behind her, the others were already hard at work, setting up temporary shelters and scanning the surrounding area for signs of human activity. They had chosen this location for its remoteness, but they knew that venturing closer to human civilization was inevitable. Lysandra approached Xenia, her silver hair catching the sunlight. "The area seems secure for now. We've detected no immediate threats." Xenia nodded, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Good. We'll need to establish a base here before we make contact with any humans." Lysandra hesitated, sensing the weight of Xenia's thoughts. "Are you worried?" Xenia sighed, turning to face her friend. "Worried? Yes, I suppose I am. This planet is so different from anything we've encountered before. The humans, they're unpredictable. We don't know how they'll react to our presence." "We've faced uncertainty before," Lysandra reminded her gently. "And we've always found a way through. This will be no different." Xenia offered a small, appreciative smile. "You're right. We can't afford to hesitate. We need to find this human scientist Alex and determine if he can help us." The decision made, the group quickly fell into a routine. They divided their tasks, some focusing on setting up their technology while others began studying the local environment. Despite the strangeness of this new world, the Arendor women were nothing if not adaptable. Their centuries of scientific advancement and exploration had prepared them well for this mission. Blending in. To move freely among the humans, the Arendor women had to adapt their appearance. Fortunately, their technology allowed them to blend in seamlessly. They altered their attire to match Earth's fashion, adopting the styles of clothing they observed from the few humans they had seen from a distance. But it wasn't just about clothing. They had to learn the intricacies of human behavior, the subtle social cues, and the complexities of Earth's languages. It was a daunting task, but they approached it with the same determination they had brought to their scientific endeavors. Lysandra, who had always been skilled in communication, took the lead in this effort. She immersed herself in Earth's media, television broadcasts, internet forums, and news articles, absorbing information at an astonishing rate. She quickly became the group's expert on human culture, coaching the others on how to interact without raising suspicion. Xenia, too, dedicated herself to the task. As the leader, she knew that she had to set an example. She practiced speaking English, mimicking the accents she heard, and studied the social norms that governed human interactions. It was exhausting work, but it was necessary. They couldn't afford any mistakes. After several days of preparation, they were ready to make their first foray into human society. They had identified a nearby city, a bustling metropolis that offered both anonymity and the resources they needed to track down Alex. It was a place where they could blend in, where they could observe without drawing too much attention. As they made their way through the city streets, Xenia couldn't help but marvel at the sheer diversity of the human population. People of all shapes, sizes, and colors moved about, each with their own unique style and mannerisms. It was a far cry from the uniformity of Arendor, where the population had become more homogeneous over time. But beneath the surface differences, Xenia noticed something else, an undercurrent of tension. The humans moved quickly, their faces often set in expressions of worry or determination. There was a palpable sense of urgency, as if they were all rushing towards some unseen goal. It reminded her, uncomfortably, of the desperation that had driven the Arendor women to Earth in the first place. "Xenia, look," Lysandra whispered, nodding towards a nearby newsstand. Xenia followed her gaze and saw the headline splashed across the front page of a newspaper: "Scientific Breakthroughs in Genetics, Dr. Alexander Reed Speaks Out." Her heart skipped a beat. This was the man they were looking for. The man who might hold the key to their future. Without hesitation, Xenia purchased the newspaper and quickly scanned the article. It was a profile on Dr. Alexander Reed, a renowned geneticist whose groundbreaking research had earned him international acclaim. The article described him as a brilliant but reclusive figure, dedicated to his work and rarely seen in public. "He's perfect," Lysandra said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "If anyone can help us, it's him." Xenia nodded, feeling a surge of hope. "We need to find him. And we need to do it soon." The approach. Finding Dr. Reed proved to be more challenging than they had anticipated. His reclusive nature meant that he kept his personal life well guarded, and his laboratory was located in a heavily secured research facility on the outskirts of the city. The Arendor women couldn't simply walk in and ask to speak with him; they needed a plan. Over the next few days, they observed the facility from a distance, studying its security measures and identifying potential points of entry. Xenia and Lysandra debated the best course of action, weighing the risks of direct contact against the need to remain undetected. Finally, they settled on a plan. They would approach Dr. Reed in his laboratory, but only after ensuring that they could do so without alerting the authorities or drawing undue attention. It was a delicate operation, one that required precision and careful timing. The night of the operation, the air was thick with tension. Xenia's team gathered in their temporary base, reviewing the details one last time. They had chosen to make their move under the cover of darkness, when the facility's security would be at its lowest. Xenia adjusted the device hidden beneath her coat, a piece of Arendor technology that would temporarily disable the facility's surveillance systems. It was a risky move, but they couldn't afford to leave any digital trace of their presence. Lysandra placed a hand on Xenia's shoulder. "Are you ready?" Xenia took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Yes, let's do this." They moved swiftly and silently through the city streets, avoiding the few people still out at that hour. When they reached the perimeter of the research facility, Xenia activated the device. A faint hum filled the air as the signal jammer went to work, creating a brief window of opportunity. With practiced efficiency, they scaled the fence and made their way towards the main building. The facility was a maze of corridors and laboratories, but they had studied the blueprints carefully. They knew exactly where to find Dr. Reed's office. As they approached the door, Xenia felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was at the moment they had been working towards for so long. She nodded to Lysandra, who carefully picked the lock, and then they slipped inside. The office was dimly lit, the glow of computer screens casting eerie shadows across the room. Papers were strewn across the desk, charts and graphs documenting the latest results of Dr. Reed's experiments. But the room was empty. Xenia's pulse quickened. Where was he? Dr. Reed's eyes narrowed, but there was no immediate alarm in his demeanor. Extinction. What are you talking about? Who sent you? Xenia hesitated for a fraction of a second. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed what she would say, but the gravity of it was overwhelming now that it was real. There was no turning back. "We are not from this world," she said, her voice laced with the desperation she felt. "We come from a distant planet called Arendor. Our species is dying because of a lack of genetic diversity. We've searched the galaxy for a solution, but no species has been compatible with ours, until we heard of humans." The weight of her words hung in the air, and Xenia watched as Alex processed what she had said. His expression shifted from skepticism to something more complicated, a mix of curiosity, disbelief, and perhaps even a trace of fear. "Not from this world," he repeated slowly, as if trying to make sense of it. You're saying you're aliens. Xenia nodded, steeling herself for his reaction. Yes, we've come to Earth because we believe that your species may hold the key to our survival. We need your help to determine if humans and Arendar women are genetically compatible. There was a long silence as Alex studied them, his sharp mind clearly working through the implications of what he was hearing. The tension in the room was palpable, and Xenia's heart raced as she awaited his response. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice measured but tinged with a hint of awe. If what you're saying is true, this could be one of the most significant scientific discoveries in history, but you have to understand how unbelievable this sounds. Why should I trust you? Xenia stepped closer, her voice softening as she met his gaze. Because we have no other choice. We've exhausted every other option. Our people are dying, Dr. Reed. We're running out of time. Please, help us. For a moment she saw something flicker in his eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Compassion? Curiosity? Perhaps both. But whatever it was enough to break through the wall of skepticism that had been holding him back. Alex exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as he considered their request. All right, he said finally, his tone resigned but not unkind. I'll help you. But we need to proceed carefully. This kind of research, it's going to attract attention if we're not careful. Xenia's relief was palpable, but she knew this was only the beginning. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. We understand the risks, and we're prepared to take them, whatever it takes to save our people. Alex nodded, his gaze thoughtful as he began to formulate a plan. We'll need to set up a secure lab away from prying eyes, and we'll have to be very careful about how we proceed. If word of this gets out before we're ready. We won't let that happen, Lysandra interjected, her voice firm. We're prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect this research and you. Alex looked between them, recognizing the seriousness of their intent. All right, he said again, this time with more conviction. Let's get started. A fragile alliance. The following days were a whirlwind of activity as Xenia and her team worked alongside Alex to set up a secure laboratory in a remote location. They chose an abandoned industrial facility on the outskirts of the city, a place long forgotten by most of the world. It was perfect, isolated, discreet, and easily defensible. Alex was meticulous in his preparations. He insisted on triple-checking every piece of equipment, ensuring that their work would remain undetected by any outside observers. Xenia admired his dedication, but she could also see the toll it was taking on him. This was a man who had dedicated his life to science, and now he was being asked to take a leap of faith that defied all conventional logic. As they worked together, Xenia found herself drawn to Alex in ways she hadn't expected. There was a quiet intensity about him, a deep passion for his work that mirrored her own dedication to her people. But there was also a vulnerability, a sense of isolation that resonated with her. She knew what it was like to carry the weight of an entire species on her shoulders, to feel the crushing pressure of responsibility. Late one night, as they worked side by side in the dimly lit lab, Xenia found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone else. She told him about Arendar, about the beauty of their world, the tragedy of their decline, and the desperate hope that had driven them to Earth. Alex listened intently, his expression softening as he absorbed her story. When she finished, he was silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. You've been through so much, he said quietly, his voice tinged with empathy. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like, to know that your entire species is on the brink of extinction. Xenia nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. It's unbearable at times. I try to stay strong for my people, but inside I'm terrified. Every day I wonder if we'll find a solution in time. If we'll survive. Alex reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was simple, but it carried a depth of understanding that touched Xenia in ways she hadn't expected. You're not alone anymore, he said softly. We're in this together now, and I promise you I'll do everything I can to help. For the first time in a long while, Xenia felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps against all odds, they would find a way to save her people, and perhaps, just perhaps, she had found someone who understood her in a way that no one else ever could. The day they conducted the first experiment was one of nervous anticipation. The plan was simple. They would take a sample of Xenia's DNA and compare it with human DNA to determine the potential for genetic compatibility. It was a preliminary test, but its results would set the course for everything that followed. Xenia watched as Alex prepared the equipment, his hands steady and sure. Despite the gravity of the situation, there was a sense of calm in the lab, a quiet confidence that came from knowing they were on the cusp of something monumental. When everything was ready, Xenia offered her arm, allowing Alex to draw a small sample of her blood. She barely flinched as the needle pierced her skin, her focus entirely on what was to come. Alex worked in silence, his brow furrowed in concentration as he analyzed the sample. Xenia and Lysandra watched from the sidelines, their tension mounting with each passing minute. Finally, Alex looked up from the microscope, his expression unreadable. Xenia's heart skipped a beat as she waited for him to speak. "There's something here," he said slowly, his voice filled with wonder. "Your DNA. It's similar to ours in many ways, but there are differences, significant ones. But the important thing is, there's potential. We might actually be able to do this." Xenia's breath caught in her throat. "You mean, there's a chance we're compatible?" Alex nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Yes, it's not definitive, and there's a lot more work to be done, but this is a good start. A very good start." The relief that washed over Xenia was overwhelming. For the first time since they had arrived on Earth, she felt a genuine sense of hope. They were on the right path. They had found what they were looking for. As she met Alex's gaze, she saw the same hope reflected in his eyes. This was more than just a scientific discovery, it was a lifeline for her people. And it was a bond that was beginning to form between them, one that transcended their differences and brought them together in a shared purpose. But as they celebrated this small victory, Xenia couldn't shake the feeling that they were only at the beginning of a much longer journey. There would be challenges ahead, opposition, dangers, and perhaps even betrayal. But for now, she allowed herself to savor this moment, to believe that they were one step closer to saving Arendor. And as the night drew on, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held, not just for her people, but for the fragile alliance that had begun to form between her and the human scientist who had become her last hope. The following weeks were a blur of activity, marked by long hours in the lab and late-night strategy sessions. Xenia, Alex, and their combined teams of Arendor women and human scientists worked tirelessly, driven by the weight of their mission and the growing sense of urgency that hung over them like a storm cloud. For Xenia, the lab had become a second home, a place where she could focus her mind and push aside the fear that gnawed at her heart. The sterile environment, filled with the hum of machinery and the soft glow of computer screens, was a world away from the vibrant landscapes of Arendor. But it was here, in this unassuming space, that the future of her people would be decided. Alex was a constant presence at her side, his dedication to the project unwavering. She had come to rely on him, not just as a scientist but as a confidant, someone who understood the stakes as deeply as she did. Their partnership had grown stronger with each passing day, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose. But beneath the surface of their professional relationship, Xenia could feel something more, a bond that was beginning to take root, something deeper and more personal than she had ever anticipated. It was a connection that both frightened and exhilarated her, and she found herself drawn to Alex in ways she hadn't expected. Late one evening, after the rest of the team had retired for the night, Xenia found herself alone in the lab with Alex. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the computer screens, the only sound the rhythmic clicking of keys as Alex worked. Xenia watched him from across the room, her thoughts swirling. She had always been careful to keep her emotions in check, to focus on the mission above all else. But now, in the quiet of the lab, she couldn't ignore the feelings that had been building inside her. "Alex," she said softly, breaking the silence. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "What is it, Xenia?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. I just wanted to thank you. For everything you've done. I know this isn't easy, and I know we've asked a lot of you, but you've been incredible. I don't know how we would have gotten this far without you." Alex's expression softened, and he set down the equipment he had been working with. "You don't have to thank me, Xenia. I'm doing this because I believe in it. Because I believe in you and your people. But I appreciate your words. They mean a lot." Xenia felt a warmth spread through her at his response, but she also felt a pang of guilt. She was leading her people on a dangerous path, one that could have far-reaching consequences for both Arendor and Earth. And Alex, by joining them, was putting his career and possibly his life on the line. She walked over to where he stood, the distance between them suddenly feeling too vast. I don't want you to regret this," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "We're asking so much of you, and I don't want you to feel like you're being pulled into something you can't get out of." Alex reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "Zania, I made my choice when I decided to help you. I knew the risks, and I accepted them. I don't regret it, not for a second. And I don't want you to worry about me. We're in this together, remember." Zania's heart swelled at his words, and she squeezed his hand in return. "Thank you, Alex. That means more to me than you know." For a moment they stood there in the soft glow of the lab, their hands clasped together as the world outside faded away. It was a moment of connection, of unspoken understanding, and Zania felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps, in the midst of all the uncertainty and fear, there was something beautiful beginning to grow. But as much as she wanted to hold on to that moment, she knew there was work to be done. Reluctantly, she released Alex's hand and stepped back, her resolve returning. "We should get back to work," she said, her voice steady once more. "There's still so much to do." Alex nodded, but there was a glint in his eye that told her he hadn't missed the significance of their exchange.
Right.
Let's get to it. Exploring genetic compatibility. The early experiments had been promising, but they were only the beginning. Zania and Alex knew that proving genetic compatibility between humans and Arendar women would require rigorous testing and analysis. Every step had to be carefully documented, every variable accounted for. The first phase of their research focused on the fundamental aspects of genetic structure. They needed to understand how the DNA of Arendar women interacted with human DNA on a molecular level. Were there similarities in the coding sequences? Were there specific genes that could be aligned or modified to ensure compatibility? Alex led the charge, using advanced sequencing technology to map out the genomes of both species. The process was painstakingly detailed, requiring hours of work and a level of precision that left little room for error. Zania was by his side every step of the way, providing insights from Arendar's advanced knowledge of genetics and offering her own observations. One evening, as they reviewed the latest data, Alex made a breakthrough. He had identified a series of genetic markers in the Arendar genome that appeared to correspond with certain sequences in human DNA. It was a discovery that opened up new possibilities for their research. "Look at this," Alex said, his excitement barely contained as he pointed to the screen. "These markers, they're like keys fitting into a lock. If we can manipulate these sequences just right, we might be able to create a hybrid genome that could allow for successful reproduction." Zania leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. She could see it too, the potential, the hope that they had been searching for. But there was also a sense of caution. They were venturing into uncharted territory, and the risks were immense. "It's incredible," she murmured, her mind racing with the implications. "But we need to be careful, Alex. If we push too hard, if we rush this, we could cause more harm than good." Alex nodded, his excitement tempered by her words. "I know, we'll take it step by step and we'll make sure we have all the data before moving forward. But this is a real possibility, Zania. We might actually be able to do this." They spent the next few days focused on refining their approach. Alex designed a series of experiments to test the viability of combining human and Arendar DNA, using synthetic models to simulate the process. The work was meticulous, requiring them to adjust variables, run countless simulations, and analyze the results with a fine-tooth comb. The results were promising. The synthetic models showed signs of stability, and there was a real possibility that the hybrid DNA could lead to successful reproduction. But as Zania and Alex reviewed the data, they knew that they were only at the beginning of a much longer journey. "We've made progress," Zania said, her voice a mix of hope and caution. "But we still have a long way to go. The next phase, it's going to be the real test." Alex met her gaze, his expression serious. "I know, but we're getting closer. And I believe we can do this, Zania. We have to." Zania nodded, her resolve strengthening. They had come so far, and they couldn't turn back now. The future of her people depended on the success of their work, and she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Zania and Alex grew stronger. They spent long hours together in the lab, their conversations ranging from the intricacies of genetic sequencing to the cultural differences between their worlds. It was a partnership built on mutual respect. but it was also becoming something more, something deeper and more personal. Xenia found herself drawn to Alex in ways she hadn't anticipated. There was a quiet strength to him, a determination that matched her own, and she admired his ability to remain calm and focused even in the face of immense pressure. But there was also a vulnerability to him, a sense of isolation that resonated with her. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of experiments, Xenia and Alex decided to take a break. They left the lab and stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky above was a deep indigo, dotted with stars that shimmered like diamonds. They walked in silence for a while, the tension of the day slowly melting away as they moved further from the lab. Xenia could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on her, but for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to simply be present in the moment. "This world is so different from Arendor," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "The skies, the sounds, even the air feels different." Alex glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "I've always found it fascinating, the way different worlds can feel so alien. But at the same time, there's something universal about the experience of life. No matter where you go, there's a certain beauty in it." Xenia smiled, appreciating the sentiment. "You're right. It's something I've always believed, that there's a connection between all living things, no matter how different they may seem." They continued walking, their footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. The city was quiet at this hour, the streets empty save for the occasional car passing by. It was a rare moment of peace, a brief respite from the intensity of their work. As they walked, Xenia found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to Earth. She had left her home in search of a solution to her people's plight, but she had found something more, something she hadn't expected. She had found a connection, a bond that was beginning to grow between her and Alex. "It's strange," she said after a while, her voice soft. "I never imagined I would find myself here, on a distant planet, working with someone like you. But now that I'm here, I can't imagine being anywhere else." Alex looked at her, his gaze steady and warm. "I know what you mean. This isn't where I thought I'd be either. But I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad I'm here with you." Xenia's heart fluttered at his words, a warmth spreading through her that she hadn't felt in a long time. There was something special about this moment, something that transcended the boundaries of their worlds and their species. It was a connection that went beyond the physical, something that was rooted in the deepest parts of who they were. They stopped walking, and Xenia turned to face Alex. The night air was cool against her skin, and the city lights cast a soft glow around them. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of what to say. But then she looked into his eyes and saw the same emotions reflected back at her: hope, fear, and something deeper, something that defied explanation. "Alex," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she could finish, Alex reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. The gesture was tender, filled with a warmth that took her breath away. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly, his voice laced with emotion. "I know. I feel it too." And then, slowly, as if the universe itself had conspired to bring them together in this moment, Alex leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle, tentative kiss, but it carried with it all the emotions that had been building between them: the hope, the fear, the unspoken connection that had been growing since the day they met. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between Xenia and Alex grew stronger. They spent long hours together in the lab, their conversations ranging from the intricacies of genetic sequencing to the cultural differences between their worlds. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, but it was also becoming something more, something deeper and more personal. Xenia found herself drawn to Alex in ways she hadn't anticipated. There was a quiet strength to him, a determination that matched her own, and she admired his ability to remain calm and focused even in the face of immense pressure. But there was also a vulnerability to him, a sense of isolation that resonated with her. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of experiments, Xenia and Alex decided to take a break. They left the lab and stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky above was a deep indigo, dotted with stars that shimmered like diamonds. They walked in silence for a while, the tension of the day slowly melting away as they moved further from the lab. Xenia could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on her, but for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to simply be present in the moment. "This world is so different from Arendor," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "The skies, the sounds, Even the air feels different. Alex glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. I've always found it fascinating, the way different worlds can feel so alien. But at the same time, there's something universal about the experience of life. No matter where you go, there's a certain beauty in it. Xenia smiled, appreciating the sentiment. You're right. It's something I've always believed, that there's a connection between all living things, no matter how different they may seem. They continued walking, their footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. The city was quiet at this hour, the streets empty save for the occasional car passing by. It was a rare moment of peace, a brief respite from the intensity of their work. As they walked, Xenia found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to Earth. She had left her home in search of a solution to her people's plight, but she had found something more, something she hadn't expected. She had found a connection, a bond that was beginning to grow between her and Alex. It's strange, she said after a while, her voice soft. I never imagined I would find myself here, on a distant planet, working with someone like you. But now that I'm here, I can't imagine being anywhere else. Alex looked at her, his gaze steady and warm. I know what you mean. This isn't where I thought I'd be either. But I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad I'm here with you. Xenia's heart fluttered at his words, a warmth spreading through her that she hadn't felt in a long time. There was something special about this moment, something that transcended the boundaries of their worlds and their species. It was a connection that went beyond the physical, something that was rooted in the deepest parts of who they were. They stopped walking, and Xenia turned to face Alex. The night air was cool against her skin, and the city lights cast a soft glow around them. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of what to say. But then she looked into his eyes and saw the same emotions reflected back at her: hope, fear, and something deeper, something that defied explanation. Alex, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she could finish, Alex reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. The gesture was tender, filled with a warmth that took her breath away. You don't have to say anything, he said softly, his voice laced with emotion. I know. I feel it too. And then, slowly, as if the universe itself had conspired to bring them together in this moment, Alex leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle, tentative kiss, but it carried with it all the emotions that had been building between them: the hope, the fear, the unspoken connection that had been growing since the day they met. The sterile, white walls of the makeshift lab hummed with a quiet energy as Xenia and Alex stared at the screen in front of them. It was late, the kind of late that turns into early, and both of them were running on nothing but adrenaline and determination. The breakthrough they had been working toward for so long was finally within reach. The DNA samples on the screen showed something extraordinary. The human and Arendar genetic material were not just stable, they were thriving together. The markers they had identified, which had previously seemed like anomalies, were actually the key to unlocking a hybrid genome that was not only viable but potentially superior to what either species could achieve alone. Xenia's eyes were fixed on the sequence, her breath caught in her throat as the realization washed over her. Alex, do you see this? She whispered, her voice tinged with awe. It's working. The DNA, it's not just compatible, it's merging in a way that we couldn't have predicted. Alex nodded, his gaze intense as he continued to analyze the data. This is beyond what we imagined. The sequences are forming new, stable genes. This could be the answer we've been looking for, the key to ensuring the survival of the Arendar people. Xenia's heart pounded in her chest as she processed the implications. This was more than just a scientific achievement, it was a potential lifeline for her species, a way to prevent the extinction of her people. But with that realization came a weighty responsibility, a responsibility that would require them to take the next step. We've done everything we can in the lab, Xenia said, her voice trembling with the gravity of what she was about to suggest. The next step. It has to be a living subject. We need to see if this hybrid genome can produce a viable offspring. Alex turned to her, his eyes locking onto hers with a mix of determination and concern. You're right, he said, his voice steady but laced with the same unease. But that means we need to test it with a human and an Arendar. We need to see if the genetic compatibility translates to actual reproduction. The room fell into a heavy silence as the reality of what they were discussing settled over them. This wasn't just another experiment, this was a leap into the unknown, one that could have profound implications for both their species. Xenia took a deep breath, her heart racing. We've come this far, Alex, we have to see it through. But this isn't something we can ask anyone else to do. It's too personal, too intimate. It has to be us. Alex's eyes widened slightly as he absorbed her words, the weight of her suggestion hitting him like a tidal wave. He had always known that their work could lead to something like this, but now that the moment was here, it felt overwhelming. Xenia, Alex began, his voice soft and uncertain. Are you sure this is? It's a huge step. It's not just about the science anymore. Xenia met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and vulnerability. I know, Alex, but we're the only ones who can do this. We're the ones who understand the science, the risks, and the potential consequences. And we're the ones who care enough to make this work. The room fell into silence once more, the tension between them palpable. This was a decision that would change everything, a decision that would take them beyond the boundaries of their professional relationship and into something much deeper, much more personal. Finally, Alex nodded, his expression firming with resolve. You're right, Xenia. We've come this far together, we'll take this step together too. The decision. The decision made, Xenia and Alex knew they had to proceed carefully. This wasn't just about creating a child, it was about ensuring that the process was scientifically sound, that every variable was accounted for, and that the experiment would yield results that could be replicated and studied. They spent the next few days preparing, conducting every test and analysis they could to ensure that the conditions were optimal. The tension between them was almost unbearable, a mix of anticipation, fear, and the undeniable connection that had been growing between them since the beginning of their work. One evening, as they sat together in the lab, going over the final preparations, Xenia broke the silence. Alex, if this works, if we're able to create a hybrid child, it's going to change everything. Not just for the Erendor, but for humans too. Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. I know. But it's a change that needs to happen. Our worlds are connected now, whether we like it or not. And maybe this is the way forward. Xenia's heart swelled with emotion as she listened to him speak. She had always been drawn to Alex's intelligence, his dedication, but there was something more now, something deeper. She realized that she cared for him, not just as a colleague or a friend, but as someone who had become an integral part of her life, her world. Alex, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm glad it's you. I'm glad we're doing this together. Alex looked at her, his eyes softening as he reached out to take her hand. I feel the same way, Xenia. We're in this together, and no matter what happens, we'll face it together. The moment between them was charged with unspoken emotion, a connection that had been building for months finally coming to the surface. They both knew that this was more than just an experiment, it was a leap of faith, a journey into the unknown that would bind them together in ways they hadn't anticipated. The act. The night they chose to conceive the child was both planned and spontaneous. They had gone over the science, the timing, the conditions, everything was as perfect as it could be. But as they stood together in the dim light of the lab, the reality of what they were about to do hit them with full force. Xenia felt a mixture of fear and excitement as she looked at Alex, her heart racing. This was no longer just about the science, it was about trust, about connection, about something deeply human and deeply Erendor. Are you ready? Alex asked, his voice soft but steady. Xenia nodded, though her heart was pounding in her chest. Yes, I'm ready. They moved together slowly, almost hesitantly at first, as if testing the waters of this new territory they were about to enter. But as they drew closer, the tension between them began to melt away, replaced by a deep, mutual understanding. This wasn't just about creating a child, it was about creating a future. It was about hope, about survival, about the possibility of something beautiful emerging from the challenges they had faced together. As they lay together, their bodies entwined, Xenia felt a surge of emotion that she hadn't anticipated. This was more than just a scientific experiment, this was a moment of profound connection, a union of two beings from different worlds, different species, coming together to create something new, something that had never existed before. The world outside the lab seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, their breathing synchronized, their hearts beating in unison. It was a moment of pure intimacy, pure connection, and it felt as though the universe itself had conspired to bring them together in this way. When it was over, they lay together in silence, their hands still intertwined, their breathing slowly returning to normal. The reality of what they had just done began to settle over them, but instead of fear or regret, Xenia felt a sense of peace, of rightness. "Alex," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion, "no matter what happens, thank you. For being with me, for doing this." Alex turned to her, his eyes filled with the same emotion. "Xenia, this is just the beginning. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Xenia smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek as she nodded. Together. The aftermath. The days following their union were filled with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Xenia and Alex continued their work in the lab, monitoring every aspect of Xenia's condition, watching for any signs that the hybrid embryo was developing as expected. The tension between them had eased, replaced by a deeper, more profound connection. They had crossed a line together, one that had taken them beyond the realm of science and into something much more personal, much more meaningful. Xenia couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, a quiet certainty that they had done the right thing, but with that hope came fear of the unknown, fear of what their actions would mean for the future, fear of the challenges they would inevitably face. As the days turned into weeks, Xenia began to notice the changes in her body, the subtle signs that the embryo was growing, that the hybrid child was becoming a reality. It was a moment of triumph, of validation, but it was also a moment of profound realization. This was no longer just an experiment. This was new life, a life that had never existed before, a life that carried within it the potential to change everything. As Xenia stood in the lab one evening, looking at the ultrasound image of the tiny, growing life within her, she felt a surge of emotion that brought tears to her eyes. This was more than she had ever hoped for, more than she had ever dreamed possible. Alex stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder as they looked at the image together. "It's happening, Xenia," he said softly, his voice filled with awe. "We're creating something extraordinary." Xenia nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "Yes, we are, and no matter what happens next, we'll face it together." Together, they had taken a leap of faith, a step into the unknown, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by the bond they had forged, by the life they had created, and by the hope that this new beginning would lead to a brighter, better future for both their worlds. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, his voice soft but steady. Xenia nodded, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "Yes, I'm ready." They moved together slowly, almost hesitantly at first, as if testing the waters of this new territory they were about to enter. But as they drew closer, the tension between them began to melt away, replaced by a deep, mutual understanding. This wasn't just about creating a child, it was about creating a future. It was about hope, about survival, about the possibility of something beautiful emerging from the challenges they had faced together. As they lay together, their bodies entwined, Xenia felt a surge of emotion that she hadn't anticipated. This was more than just a scientific experiment, this was a moment of profound connection, a union of two beings from different worlds, different species, coming together to create something new, something that had never existed before. The world outside the lab seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, their breathing synchronized, their hearts beating in unison. It was a moment of pure intimacy, pure connection, and it felt as though the universe itself had conspired to bring them together in this way. When it was over, they lay together in silence, their hands still intertwined, their breathing slowly returning to normal. The reality of what they had just done began to settle over them, but instead of fear or regret, Xenia felt a sense of peace, of rightness. "Alex," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion, "no matter what happens, thank you. For being with me, for doing this." Alex turned to her, his eyes filled with the same emotion. "Xenia, this is just the beginning. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Xenia smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek as she nodded. Together. The aftermath. The days following their union were filled with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Xenia and Alex continued their work in the lab, monitoring every aspect of Xenia's condition, watching for any signs that the hybrid embryo was developing as expected. The tension between them had eased, replaced by a deeper, more profound connection. They had crossed a line together, one that had taken them beyond the realm of science and into something much more personal, much more meaningful. Xania couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, a quiet certainty that they had done the right thing. But with that hope came fear of the unknown, fear of what their actions would mean for the future, fear of the challenges they would inevitably face. As the days turned into weeks, Xania began to notice the changes in her body, the subtle signs that the embryo was growing, that the hybrid child was becoming a reality. It was a moment of triumph, of validation, but it was also a moment of profound realization. This was no longer just an experiment. This was new life, a life that had never existed before, a life that carried within it the potential to change everything. As Xania stood in the lab one evening, looking at the ultrasound image of the tiny, growing life within her, she felt a surge of emotion that brought tears to her eyes. This was more than she had ever hoped for, more than she had ever dreamed possible. Alex stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder as they looked at the image together. "It's happening, Xania," he said softly, his voice filled with awe. "We're creating something extraordinary." Xania nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "Yes, we are, and no matter what happens next, we'll face it together." Together, they had taken a leap of faith, a step into the unknown, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by the bond they had forged, by the life they had created, and by the hope that this new beginning would lead to a brighter, better future for both their worlds. The days following the momentous decision that Xania and Alex had made were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and intense scientific scrutiny. Their act of creating a hybrid child was more than just a personal union, it was the culmination of their tireless work, the embodiment of their shared hope, and the beginning of something far greater than themselves. The sterile lab that had once been a place of pure science now felt different, charged with a new kind of energy. Every step Xania took, every test they ran, carried the weight of the future on their shoulders. They were no longer just scientists, they were pioneers, explorers in uncharted territory, responsible for the life growing within Xania, a life that could change the fate of two species. Xania stood in front of the monitor, her eyes scanning the readouts of her latest test results. The data was promising the embryo was developing as expected, the hybrid genome stable and thriving. But with each new piece of information came a deepening sense of responsibility, a growing awareness of the stakes involved. "Alex," Xania called softly, her voice tinged with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Come look at this." Alex joined her at the monitor, his eyes focused and intense as he reviewed the data. The numbers, the sequences, the growing life within Xania, it was all real, all happening, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. "It's incredible," Alex murmured, his voice filled with awe. "The embryo is developing exactly as we hoped. The genetic markers are stable, and the integration of human and Arendar DNA is seamless. This could work." Xenia nodded, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "But it's still early. We have to be cautious. There's so much we don't know, so many variables we can't control." Alex placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her in the moment. "We'll take it one step at a time, Xenia. We've come this far, and we'll keep moving forward. Together." The word "together" carried a new weight now, one that went beyond their shared mission. Their bond had deepened, transformed by the choice they had made to bring this new life into existence. It was a bond forged in both science and something far more profound, a connection that neither of them had anticipated but now couldn't imagine being without. The first signs. As the days turned into weeks, Xania and Alex settled into a new routine, one that revolved around the life growing inside her. They conducted regular tests, monitored the embryo's development, and meticulously documented every change, every detail. The lab became a sanctuary, a place where they could focus on their work and the incredible journey they were on. But outside the lab, the world continued to turn, and the threat of discovery loomed ever larger. Xania and Alex knew that their actions had put them on a dangerous path, one that could lead to unimaginable consequences if their work were discovered. The pressure weighed heavily on them, but they knew they had to stay focused, had to keep moving forward. One morning, as Xania was preparing for another round of tests, she felt a strange sensation of fluttering deep within her, a feeling that was both foreign and familiar. She froze, her hand instinctively going to her abdomen as she tried to make sense of what she was experiencing. "Alex," she called, her voice trembling slightly. Alex was by her side in an instant, his expression concerned. "What is it? What's wrong?" Xenia shook her head, her heart racing. I'm not sure. I felt something. Inside me. It was like movement. Alex's eyes widened, his concern shifting to something more like awe. Movement, are you sure? Xenia nodded, her breath catching in her throat. Yes, it was faint, but it was there. Without wasting a moment, Alex set up the ultrasound equipment, his hands steady despite the excitement in his eyes. Xenia lay down on the examination table, her heart pounding as Alex applied the cold gel to her abdomen and carefully moved the ultrasound wand over her skin. The monitor flickered to life, and there on the screen was the embryo, no longer just a tiny cluster of cells, but something more, something resembling a life. And as they watched, they saw it a small, delicate movement, the first sign that the child they had created was beginning to take shape. Xenia's eyes filled with tears, her emotions overwhelming her. This was real. The life inside her was real, and it was growing, thriving. Alex, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It's alive. Alex's eyes were fixed on the screen, his expression one of pure wonder. It is, Xenia. It's really happening. The moment was profound. A confirmation of everything they had hoped for, everything they had worked toward. But it was also a reminder of the immense responsibility they carried, the responsibility to protect this new life, to ensure its survival. As they stared at the screen, watching the small, fluttering movements of the embryo, Xenia felt a deep, unshakable resolve settle over her. She would do whatever it took to protect this child, to see it brought into the world safely, no matter the cost. Challenges ahead. The initial joy and relief of seeing the first signs of life soon gave way to the sobering reality of what lay ahead. The embryo's development was progressing rapidly, but with each passing day, the challenges they faced grew more daunting. Xenia's body was undergoing changes that were unfamiliar and, at times, frightening. The hybrid nature of the child meant that her pregnancy was unlike anything ever recorded in human or Arendor history. The risks were unknown, the potential complications innumerable. Xenia, we need to be careful, Alex said one evening as they reviewed her latest test results. Your body is adapting to the pregnancy, but there are signs that it's struggling to keep up with the demands of the hybrid genome. We need to monitor you closely, especially in the coming weeks. Xenia nodded, though the concern in Alex's voice sent a chill down her spine. I understand. But we have to keep going, Alex. We've come too far to stop now. Alex reached out and took her hand, his eyes filled with both determination and worry. We'll keep going, Xenia. But your safety is just as important as the child's. We need to take every precaution. Xenia squeezed his hand, grateful for his support. I trust you, Alex. Whatever we need to do, we'll do it. Together. The bond between them had only grown stronger since the night they had conceived the child. They were no longer just colleagues or even friends, they were partners in the truest sense of the word, united by a shared purpose and a shared love for the life they had created. But even as they focused on the pregnancy, the outside world was becoming increasingly hostile. The scientific community had begun to catch wind of their work, and rumors were spreading, rumors of unethical experiments, of dangerous, unregulated research. Xenia and Alex knew that it was only a matter of time before someone came looking for them. They had been careful, had taken every precaution to keep their work hidden, but the pressure was mounting. They needed to find a way to protect themselves, to ensure that the child could be born safely, away from the prying eyes of those who might seek to exploit or destroy it. We need a plan, Alex said one night as they sat together in the lab, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. We can't stay here much longer, if they find us. Xenia nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. We'll need to go somewhere remote, somewhere they can't track us. But we'll also need medical supplies, equipment, everything we need to ensure a safe delivery. Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. It won't be easy. We'll be on the run, constantly looking over our shoulders. But it's the only way. Xenia felt a pang of fear, but she pushed it aside. We've faced impossible odds before, Alex. We can do this. We have to. The days ahead would be challenging, filled with uncertainty and danger. But Xenia and Alex were determined to see it through. They had created a new life, a life that represented the future of both their worlds, and they would do whatever it took to protect it. As they began to make preparations, gathering supplies and mapping out their escape, Xenia couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency, a gnawing fear that time was running out. The world outside their lab was closing in, and they needed to be ready for whatever came next. The decision to leave the lab was not made lightly. It had been their sanctuary, the place where they had made their breakthrough, where they had created a new life. But it had also become a prison of sorts, a place where the walls seemed to close in tighter with each passing day. "We need to move soon," Alex said one morning as they packed up their most essential equipment. "The longer we stay, the greater the risk of discovery." Xenia nodded, though the thought of leaving the lab filled her with a deep sense of loss. This place had been more than just a workplace. It had been the birthplace of their dreams, the place where they had forged their bond, where they had taken the first steps toward a new future. But she knew that Alex was right. They couldn't afford to stay any longer. The world outside was becoming increasingly dangerous, and the child's safety was their top priority. "We'll go to the remote safe house in the mountains," Alex continued, his voice steady as he outlined their plan. "It's isolated, off the grid. No one will find us there. We'll have everything we need to continue monitoring the pregnancy, and it's secure enough to give us some peace of mind." Xenia listened carefully, her heart heavy but her resolve firm. "And if something goes wrong? If we're found?" "We'll be ready," Alex replied, though his eyes betrayed the weight of the question. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect you and the child, Xenia. That's a promise." Xenia reached out and took his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper. "I know, Alex, and I trust you with my life, with our lives." The preparations were intense, every detail carefully considered, every possibility accounted for. They knew they were walking a tightrope, that one wrong move could send everything crashing down around them. But they had no choice. They had to keep moving forward. As they packed the last of their supplies, Xenia took one final look around the lab. The memories of their time there, the moments of triumph and connection, flooded her mind, filling her with a bittersweet sense of nostalgia. But she knew that this was the right decision, that they were doing what they had to do to protect their future. "We'll come back someday," Alex said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "When it's safe." Xenia nodded, though she wasn't sure if that was a promise they could keep. The future was uncertain, filled with unknowns, but they had each other, and they had the life they had created together. And that, Xenia thought, was enough. The journey begins. The day they left the lab was cold and overcast, the sky heavy with the promise of rain. Xenia and Alex worked quickly and efficiently, loading their supplies into a nondescript vehicle, one that wouldn't draw attention on the road. The portable unit containing their most sensitive equipment was carefully secured, every precaution taken to ensure the embryo's safety. As they drove away from the lab, Xenia couldn't help but feel a pang of loss. The place that had been their sanctuary was now just a memory, fading into the distance as they embarked on the next leg of their journey. The road ahead was long and uncertain, the mountains looming in the distance like silent sentinels. The weight of their mission pressed down on them, but there was also a sense of relief, a feeling that they were finally taking control of their fate. As they drove through the winding mountain roads, Xenia felt the tension between them ease, replaced by a quiet determination. They were in this together, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The journey was arduous, the terrain rough and unforgiving, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. The road ahead was filled with danger, but also with hope that they could create a new future, one where their worlds could coexist in harmony. As they neared the safe house, Xenia felt a sense of calm wash over her. The mountains were remote, isolated, the perfect place to continue their work, to protect the life growing inside her. When they finally arrived, the safe house was exactly as Alex had described, a small, sturdy structure nestled among the trees, hidden from view, secure and secluded. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Xenia and Alex quickly set up their equipment, turning the small space into a functional lab. They knew that the challenges ahead were immense, that the journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came next. As night fell, Xenia stood outside the safe house, looking out over the darkened mountains. The air was crisp and cold, the stars shining brightly above, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always light to be found. Alex joined her, his presence a comforting warmth in the chilly night. "We're safe for now," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet reassurance. "We'll keep moving forward, Xenia, one step at a time." Xenia turned to him, her heart filled with a deep, unshakable resolve. We will, Alex, no matter what. Together they stood in the silence of the mountains, their hands intertwined, their hearts united in the shared purpose that had brought them together. They had created something extraordinary, something that had the potential to change everything. And they would do whatever it took to protect it. The first few days at the remote mountain safe house were a mixture of relief and tension. Xania and Alex had managed to escape the immediate danger of discovery, but the reality of their situation weighed heavily on them. The small cabin nestled among the trees was their refuge, a place where they could continue their work without the constant fear of being found, but it was also a reminder of how isolated they had become. The safe house was equipped with everything they needed: medical supplies, monitoring equipment, and enough food and water to last them for months. Alex had chosen this location carefully, knowing that its remote nature made it nearly impossible for anyone to track them down. Still, they both knew that no place was truly safe as long as their work remained a threat to those who would stop at nothing to control or destroy it. Xania spent most of her time in the small lab they had set up inside the cabin, carefully monitoring the development of the hybrid embryo. The pregnancy was progressing rapidly, more quickly than a typical human pregnancy, and each day brought new challenges and discoveries. The embryo was growing strong, its development stable and consistent, but the hybrid nature of the child meant that every step was uncharted territory. Alex was by her side, constantly assisting with the tests, analyzing the data, and ensuring that Xenia's health remained stable. The bond between them had grown even stronger since their arrival at the safe house, forged by the shared responsibility of protecting the life they had created. One evening, as they sat together by the fireplace, the flames casting flickering shadows across the room, Xenia looked at Alex, her expression thoughtful. "We've been here for almost a week," she said softly. "It feels like we're safe, but I can't shake the feeling that something is coming, that we're not out of danger yet." Alex nodded, his gaze fixed on the fire. "I've been thinking the same thing. We've done everything we can to cover our tracks, but we can't be certain that we're completely off the radar. We need to stay vigilant." Xenia sighed, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. "I just want this child to be born safely, Alex. I want us to have a chance at a real future." Alex reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. "We'll get there, Xenia. We just have to take it one day at a time." Xenia smiled faintly, grateful for his steady presence. "One day at a time," she repeated, her voice filled with quiet determination. Despite the relative calm of the first few days, Xenia and Alex knew better than to let their guard down. They continued to monitor the area around the safe house, using a combination of surveillance equipment and their own instincts to ensure that no one was approaching their location. But as the days turned into weeks, a sense of unease began to settle over them. It was subtle at first, small things that could easily be dismissed as paranoia. A faint rustling in the trees that seemed out of place. A strange feeling that they were being watched. Xenia tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the pregnancy and the work they still had to do. Then, one afternoon, as Xenia was preparing for another round of tests, she noticed something strange on the monitors. The equipment they had set up to monitor the area around the safe house was picking up an unusual signal, something that didn't match the patterns of the natural environment. "Alex," she called, her voice tense. "Come look at this." Alex hurried over, his expression serious as he studied the data on the screen. "What is it?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with concern. "There's something out there," Xenia replied, pointing to the monitor. "It's faint, but it's definitely not natural. I think someone's trying to find us." Alex frowned, his mind racing. Could it be a glitch? Maybe the equipment is picking up interference from something else. Xenia shook her head, her instincts telling her otherwise. "I don't think so. This signal is too deliberate, too controlled. Whoever or whatever it is, they're close." Alex's jaw tightened, and he immediately began checking the other monitoring equipment, looking for any additional signs of activity. The tension in the room was palpable, the fear of discovery looming over them like a dark cloud. After several minutes, Alex stepped back from the monitors, his expression grim. "We can't be sure, but you're right, something's out there. We need to prepare for the worst." Xenia's heart raced as she considered the implications. They had known this day might come, but the reality of it was terrifying. They were alone, cut off from the rest of the world, with no one to rely on but each other. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. We need to be ready to leave at a moment's notice, Alex replied, his tone steady. We'll pack what we can, but we have to be ready to abandon the rest if it comes to that. Our priority is your safety and the safety of the child. Xenia nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. I'll start packing the essentials, she said, already moving toward the storage area where they kept their most important supplies. We need to make sure we're ready if we have to go. As they worked together to prepare for a potential evacuation, the sense of unease continued to grow. The safe house, once a place of refuge, now felt like a trap, a place where they could be cornered with no way out. Xenia couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out, that the forces they had been hiding from were closing in. But she refused to give in to fear. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to let everything fall apart now. The following night, the tension reached a breaking point. Xenia was in the lab, running another series of tests, when she heard a faint sound outside the cabin, barely audible over the hum of the equipment. Her heart skipped a beat, and she froze, straining to listen. The sound came again, louder this time, a rustling in the trees, followed by the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on the forest floor. Alex, Xenia whispered urgently, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone's out there. Alex was at her side in an instant, his expression tense as he grabbed the small handgun they had kept hidden in the lab for emergencies. He moved to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to see outside. In the dim light of the moon, Alex saw them, figures moving through the trees, their movements deliberate and calculated. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more, and they were closing in on the safe house. They've found us, Alex said, his voice low and grim. We need to go. Now. Xenia's heart raced as she grabbed the portable unit containing the most critical data and equipment. She had prepared for this, but the reality of it was terrifying. They were out of time, out of options. Alex led the way to the back door, his movements quick and efficient. We'll take the back route through the woods, he said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped them both. It's rough terrain, but it'll give us the best chance of losing them. Xenia nodded, her mind focused on the task at hand. She couldn't afford to think about what would happen if they were caught, couldn't afford to let fear paralyze her. As they slipped out of the cabin and into the dark forest, the sounds of their pursuers grew louder, closer. Xenia's heart pounded in her chest as they moved quickly and silently through the trees, the cold night air biting at her skin. The forest was dense, the undergrowth thick and unforgiving. Every step was a challenge, every rustle of leaves a potential giveaway. Xenia's breath came in short, sharp gasps as she fought to keep up with Alex, the weight of the portable unit making every movement more difficult. But they couldn't stop. They couldn't afford to slow down. The people hunting them were relentless, and if they were caught, it would be the end, not just for them, but for the child they were carrying. The chase seemed to go on forever, the forest a labyrinth of shadows and sounds. Xenia's legs burned with exhaustion, her lungs screaming for air, but she forced herself to keep going, to push through the pain. Just when it seemed like they might be able to lose their pursuers, a bright light suddenly cut through the darkness, blinding them. Xenia's heart leaped into her throat as she realized they had been cornered, trapped between the dense trees and the advancing figures. Get down, Alex shouted, pulling Xenia to the ground just as a burst of gunfire shattered the night. The bullets tore through the trees, sending splinters of wood flying in all directions. Xenia clutched the portable unit to her chest, her body trembling with fear as she pressed herself against the ground. Alex fired back, his shots precise and controlled, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. Xenia knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Go, Alex shouted over the chaos, his voice filled with urgency. Run. I'll hold them off. Xenia's heart ached at the thought of leaving him behind, but she knew he was right. The child's safety was their top priority, and she had to do whatever it took to protect it. With tears in her eyes, Xenia scrambled to her feet and ran, her legs screaming in protest as she pushed herself to move faster. The forest blurred around her, the sounds of gunfire and shouts fading into the distance as she focused on one thing: getting the child to safety. The terrain was rough, the darkness disorienting, but Xenia forced herself to keep going, to push through the fear and the pain. She didn't know where she was headed, only that she had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of the danger that was closing in on them. As she ran, the weight of the portable unit pressing against her chest, Xenia couldn't help but think of Alex, of the bond they had forged, of the life they had created together. She prayed that he would find a way to survive, that they would be reunited, that they would have a chance to build the future they had dreamed of. But for now, all she could do was run and hope that she could stay one step ahead of the darkness that was closing in. Xenia's flight through the forest was a blur of fear and determination. The sounds of pursuit had faded, but she knew better than to assume she was safe. The people hunting them were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. The forest was a maze of trees and shadows, the terrain rough and unforgiving. Xenia's legs ached with exhaustion, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she pushed herself to keep moving. The portable unit felt like a lead weight in her arms, but she clutched it tightly, knowing that it held the key to everything they had worked for. As she stumbled through the undergrowth, Xenia's thoughts were consumed by fear and desperation. She had to find a way to protect the child, to keep it safe from those who would destroy it. But she was alone, outnumbered, and running out of options. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Xenia spotted a small, narrow cave hidden among the rocks. It was barely visible in the darkness, but it was her only chance. With a surge of adrenaline, Xenia scrambled toward the cave, her heart pounding in her chest. She ducked inside, the narrow entrance barely wide enough to accommodate her and the portable unit. The darkness closed in around her, the cave cool and damp, but it offered a momentary respite from the danger outside. Xenia collapsed against the cool stone wall, her body trembling with exhaustion. She could barely catch her breath, her heart racing, as she listened for any sign of pursuit. But the forest outside was silent, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. For a moment Xenia allowed herself to believe that she was safe, that she had outrun her pursuers. But she knew better than to let her guard down. They were still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. Xenia's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan. She couldn't stay in the cave forever, but she had nowhere else to go. The safe house was compromised, and she was alone in the middle of the forest with no way to contact Alex or anyone else who could help. She glanced down at the portable unit in her arms, the weight of it pressing against her chest. The child's future depended on her ability to stay hidden, to stay safe, to protect the life they had created. But how could she do that when she was so alone, so vulnerable? Xenia took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to panic, couldn't afford to give in to fear. She had to stay strong, had to keep moving, had to protect the child at all costs. As she sat in the darkness of the cave, her mind racing with possibilities, Xenia made a silent vow. She would do whatever it took to protect the child, to ensure its survival. She would not let their work be in vain, would not let the future they had dreamed of be destroyed. Even if it meant sacrificing everything she had. The night wore on, the hours dragging by as Xenia huddled in the cave, listening to the sounds of the forest outside. The fear that had gripped her earlier had begun to fade, replaced by a steely determination to protect the life she carried. But as the first light of dawn began to filter through the narrow entrance of the cave, Xenia heard something that made her heart skip a beat of faint, distant sound that didn't belong in the natural symphony of the forest. Footsteps. Xenia's breath caught in her throat as she strained to listen. The footsteps were getting closer, slow and deliberate, as if someone was carefully searching the area. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to think, had to find a way to stay hidden. The cave was narrow, the entrance barely visible, but if someone was close enough, they would see it. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and Xenia knew she was out of time. She pressed herself against the back wall of the cave, the cold stone pressing into her back as she clutched the portable unit tightly. Then, the footsteps stopped, right outside the entrance to the cave. Xenia's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with fear. She could hear the sound of someone breathing, the rustle of clothing as they moved closer. And then, to her surprise, she heard a familiar voice. Xenia, the voice called softly, filled with concern. "Are you in there? It's me, Leora." Xenia's breath caught in her throat as relief washed over her. Leora had found her, thank the stars. Leora had found her. She scrambled to the entrance of the cave, her hands trembling as she pushed aside the branches that partially obscured the opening. There, standing just outside, was Leora, her face pale with worry but filled with determination. Leora, Xenia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're here." Leora nodded, her eyes filled with relief, as she reached out to help Xenia out of the cave. "I've been looking for you all night. When I heard the gunfire, I was so scared. I thought I'd lost you." Xenia's heart swelled with gratitude as she allowed Leora to help her to her feet. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I didn't know what to do. I was so scared." Leora smiled faintly, though her eyes were filled with concern. "We're not safe yet, Xenia. They're still out there looking for us. But we have to keep moving. We have to find a way to get out of here." Xenia nodded, her resolve strengthening. "We will, Leora. We'll protect this child together." Together, they began to make their way through the forest, moving as quickly and quietly as they could. The fear that had gripped Xenia earlier was still there, but it was tempered by the knowledge that she wasn't alone, that she had an ally, a friend who was willing to fight for the same future she was. The journey ahead was still fraught with danger, the threat of discovery ever present. But Xenia and Leora were determined to see it through, to protect the life they had created, no matter what. And as they moved deeper into the forest, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the trees, Xenia allowed herself a moment of hope, a hope that they could find a way out, that they could build the future they had dreamed of, even in the face of overwhelming odds. They had to. The forest was bathed in the soft glow of dawn as Xenia and Leora moved carefully through the dense undergrowth, their breaths misting in the cool morning air. The danger they had just escaped was still fresh in their minds, but they couldn't afford to slow down. The people hunting them were relentless, and they knew that the safety they sought was still far from reach. Xenia's thoughts raced as they navigated the rough terrain, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. The child she carried was more than just a symbol of hope, it was the future of her people, and perhaps even humanity. She had to protect it at all costs, even if that meant making sacrifices she had never imagined. But as they moved deeper into the forest, a new resolve began to form in Xenia's mind. They couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan, a way to protect the child, to secure a future where it could thrive, away from the dangers that seemed to close in on them from every side. It was then that she realized the answer had been with her all along. Arendor, her home planet, was the key. The advanced technology and the resources of her people could offer the protection they desperately needed. And beyond that, it was where her child could grow up surrounded by a culture and a people who would understand its unique heritage. But there was another part of her that hesitated, a part that knew what returning to Arendor would mean for her and Alex. Their bond had deepened into something that transcended their original mission, something that had grown out of their shared struggles and triumphs. Leaving Earth would be leaving behind the world that had brought them together, the world that Alex had devoted his life to. Yet, as the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Xenia knew that there was no other choice. It was the only way to ensure the safety of their child and to give them a chance at a future. "We need to go to Arendor," Xenia said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence as they paused to rest. Leora looked at her, surprise and concern flashing across her face. "Arendor. But it's so far. How would we get there? And what about Alex?" Xenia's heart ached at the thought of leaving Alex behind, but she shook her head, her resolve hardening. "We can't stay here, Leora. Arendor is the only place where we'll be safe, where the child will be safe. And as for Alex, I need to talk to him. He deserves to know what we're planning." Leora nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the decision. "You're right, Xenia. If we stay here, we'll never be free from the threat. But going to Arendor, it's a huge risk. Are you sure?" Xenia met her gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm sure, Leora. It's the only way." A reunion and a decision. As the morning wore on, Xenia and Leora made their way back to the area where they had last seen Alex. The tension in the air was palpable, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig sending a jolt of fear through them. But as they neared the spot, they heard a familiar voice calling out to them. "Xenia. Leora." It was Alex. Relief flooded Xenia as she saw him emerge from the trees, his clothes disheveled and his face etched with exhaustion, but otherwise unharmed. Without thinking, she rushed to him, wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. "Alex, thank the stars you're okay," Xenia whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Alex held her close, his relief evident as he whispered back, "I thought I'd lost you." When I heard the gunfire, I was so afraid. Xenia pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper. "We're okay, we made it, but Alex, we need to talk." The three of them found a small clearing where they could catch their breath and discuss what had happened. Xenia and Leora filled Alex in on their plan to go to Arendor, explaining their reasoning and the urgency of the situation. At first Alex was silent, his expression unreadable as he absorbed what they were saying. Xenia's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for his response, knowing that this decision would change everything. Finally Alex spoke, his voice measured but filled with emotion. "Arendor. It makes sense. It's the best chance we have to keep the child safe. But Xenia, what does this mean for us? For everything we've built here?" Xenia's eyes filled with tears as she reached out to take his hand. "Alex, I know this is hard, but I can't do this without you. I want you to come with us to be with me, with our child. Arendor can be a new beginning for all of us." Alex's grip tightened on her hand as he searched her eyes, his own emotions swirling just beneath the surface. He had spent his entire life on Earth, dedicated to his work, his mission to advance human knowledge. But now, faced with the possibility of leaving it all behind, he realized that his priorities had shifted. Xenia, the child they had created, the future they could build together, these things had become more important than anything else. After what felt like an eternity, Alex nodded, his decision made. "I'll go with you, Xenia, we'll do this together." A wave of relief and joy washed over Xenia as she smiled through her tears. "Thank you, Alex. I don't know what I would do without you." Leora, who had been quietly observing the exchange, spoke up. "Then it's settled. We need to find a way off this planet and get to Arendor as soon as possible. But how?" Xenia thought for a moment, her mind racing through the possibilities. "There's an old Arendor outpost not far from here, hidden deep in the mountains. It's been abandoned for years, but if we can get there, we might be able to find a way to contact my people. They could send a ship to bring us back." Alex nodded, his mind already working on the logistics. "Then that's our plan. We'll head for the outpost and make contact. But we need to move quickly. There's no telling how much time we have before they find us again." With their plan set, the three of them wasted no time in gathering their supplies and setting off toward the mountains. The journey would be long and difficult, but they were united in their purpose, driven by the hope of a new beginning. The trek to the Arendor outpost was grueling, the mountainous terrain proving to be both physically and mentally exhausting. But Xenia, Alex, and Leora pressed on, fueled by the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, a future where their child could grow up safe and free. The days blurred together as they navigated the dense forest, climbed rocky slopes, and crossed rushing streams. The outpost was well hidden, its location known only to a few, but Xenia's instincts and the faint traces of ancient Arendor technology guided them toward their destination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the entrance to the outpost, a nondescript cave hidden in the side of a mountain. Inside, the remnants of Arendor technology lay dormant, covered in dust but still functional. Xenia quickly set to work, accessing the communications console and sending out a distress signal to her people. The message was simple and urgent: they needed immediate extraction. As they waited for a response, the tension was palpable. The outpost was secure, but they knew it wouldn't be long before their pursuers caught up with them. The minutes felt like hours as they huddled together, watching the console for any sign that their message had been received. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the console beeped, indicating an incoming transmission. Xenia's heart leaped as she activated the display, revealing the face of an Arendor commander. Xenia, the commander, said, his voice filled with relief. "We received your signal. A ship is en route to your location. Hold tight, we'll be there soon." A wave of relief washed over the group as the transmission ended. They had done it, they were going to make it to Arendor. But their relief was short-lived. As they prepared to settle in and wait for the ship's arrival, they heard the sound they had been dreading, the distant rumble of vehicles approaching the outpost. "They've found us," Alex said, his voice tense as he moved to secure the entrance. Xenia's heart raced as she realized they were out of time. The ship was on its way, but their pursuers were closing in fast. They needed to buy themselves enough time for the ship to arrive, but how? Leora, ever the strategist, quickly assessed the situation. "We can't hold them off for long, but we can slow them down. The entrance is narrow, we can use that to our advantage. The three of them quickly set to work, using the natural features of the cave and the remnants of Arendor technology to create makeshift barricades. They knew it wouldn't be enough to stop their pursuers, but it might buy them the precious minutes they needed. As the sounds of the approaching vehicles grew louder, Xenia felt a surge of determination. They were so close to escaping, to finding a new life on Arendor. She couldn't let it end here. Whatever happens, we stay together, Xenia said, her voice firm as she looked at Alex and Leora. We'll get through this. Alex nodded, his eyes filled with resolve. We will, Xenia. We've come too far to give up now. Leora tightened her grip on her makeshift weapon, her expression grim. Let's make them work for it. The next few minutes were a blur of chaos and fear as their pursuers reached the entrance and began their assault. The cave echoed with the sounds of gunfire and shouts as Xenia, Alex, and Leora fought desperately to hold them off. But just as it seemed like they were about to be overwhelmed, a new sound filled the air, a low, humming vibration that resonated through the ground. Xenia's heart leaped as she recognized the sound of an approaching Arendor ship. "They're here," Xenia shouted, a mixture of relief and urgency in her voice. "We have to get to the surface." The three of them made a break for it, racing through the cave toward the exit as the Arendor ship descended from the sky, its powerful engines kicking up dust and debris. Their pursuers, momentarily distracted by the ship, hesitated just long enough for Xenia, Alex, and Leora to reach the ship's boarding ramp. The ramp lowered, and they scrambled aboard, the roar of the engines nearly drowning out the sounds of the battle still raging outside. As the ship began to lift off, Xenia looked back one last time at the outpost, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. They had made it, they were leaving Earth behind. But with that came the knowledge that they were also leaving behind a part of their lives, a part of themselves. As the ship ascended into the sky, the blue-green planet of Earth slowly receding into the distance, Xenia turned to Alex, her heart filled with gratitude and love. "We're really doing this," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. Alex nodded, his eyes filled with the same mixture of emotions. "Yes, we are, together." Leora, who had been standing quietly to the side, stepped forward, her expression softening. "We'll make it, Xenia. We'll make a new life on Arendor, a life where we can be free." Xenia smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. The journey ahead would be difficult, but they had each other, and they had the child who represented the future of both their worlds. As the ship entered the vast expanse of space, leaving Earth behind, Xenia felt a sense of hope for the future, hope for their child, and hope for the new life they would build together on Arendor. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with possibilities and challenges, but as long as they faced it together, Xenia knew they could overcome anything. And so with their hearts full of hope and their eyes set on the stars, Xenia, Alex, and Leora embarked on their new journey, one that would take them to Arendor, to a new home, and to a future filled with promise.